Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jack Farmer. He's Andy Rossi, and this is the Evolution of Movies show. And we have a doozy for you, one that I am very excited to untangle. But first, Andy, how you been, fella?
I'm doing great, and I love the word doozy.
Yes, I try to fit it in there at least once a month.
Yeah, I noticed. Don't think I don't.
I appreciate that. Well, speaking of doozies, we have a doozy of a guest today. We are going back in time, you could say, to bring back one of the OGs, James Shippy. How the hell you doing, you old gunslinger?
Doing all right. Okay. I'm doing all right.
That's Bill's nephew.
Are you? Oh my goodness! Yeah, you're gonna have to do the Denzel voice this entire episode. We've got a. How you been? For everyone who hasn't been following you or has been wondering why you're not on this show anymore, what have you been up to? Let the people know.
Yeah, well, I'm now a reporter and producer for AM news radio show up in Portland. So I've been pretty busy doing that. It's been taking up a lot of my time. Very
cool. Yeah. So you're doing important stuff, so you can't be here. Andy and I throwing our lives away, still working on this podcast. But I'm glad to have you back. I'm glad for this one in particular, because we're going to need your ability to dissect movies big time, because we got a big one today. What this is, though, for anyone who's watched this for the first time, listening for the first time, it's the Evolution of Movies show. And what we do is we watch a movie and chat about it book club style, but we call it Evolution of Movies because we always pick a movie that came out 1 year after the last movie we watched. So we started in 1980, went to 1981, 1982. Now we're all the way up to 2020, a time when movies came to our living rooms with hits like Greenland, Pixar's Soul, and of course, Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Oh.
But we aren't talking about any of those. We're talking about Tenet, a movie IMDb describes as armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world. A protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time. James, had you seen this movie before, and your thoughts going into it? And of course, was it as confusing as even the synopsis made it sound?
Well, look, about 30 minutes into this film, I said, what did I get myself into? Okay, let's just be clear on that one. No, I did see this movie. I mean, this movie, if I remember, this was like a pandemic movie, right? Like, I think it kept getting pushed back. It came out in 2020. I remember seeing a preview before the world shut down. And I remember seeing it at home, like at the end of 2020. I want to believe. I can't remember where I saw it. Maybe it was HBO Max or one of those stations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it was one of the first movies to try to be back in a theater when it first came out, too.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I remember then I got about halfway through the film and I started it over again, which I never do. I don't know, I don't know if I recommend that, but I had to do it so I could try and see if I understood what was going on.
With closed captions on.
Right. Yeah, definitely with closed captions, always. But I saw it again this time. And since I already knew the premise pretty much, it was easier to watch, but I still was confused by the third act, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but this is just one of those movies that you just don't know what's going on at a certain point unless you're like a nuclear physicist. Yeah, Christopher Nolan, or you need Neil deGrasse Tyson on speed dial, okay, to explain some things to you.
This movie, so I always wanted to see it because I like Christopher Nolan movies in general. But everyone talked about how confusing it was, and it's a long movie, so I was always put off. I finally saw it this time around, and I remember thinking as I was watching this movie, they're trying to make it hard to follow. Like it's not even like it is hard to follow. It feels like he's like, I'm going to try to lose the audience every step of the way. It's how this movie felt like it was watching to me, because there's so much stuff. I feel like there has to be an easier way to get this point across than what they're doing.
I was just thinking, how great would it have been to just watch Bill and Ted? I haven't seen that yet, but I'm fairly certain I could follow that plot.
I hear that plot is just as confusing and difficult to understand. But Andy, What did you think about this movie? And of course, it's the Rotten Tomatoes game. Can you guess the score?
This movie was fun to watch, for one. Like, the graphics and the stunts and the fight sequences, the opening, which we'll talk about soon, is amazing. Robert Pattinson is pretty hunky, so you got some good hunk stuff going. But yeah, I can't wait to talk about it because I'm so confused. But Christopher Nolan's great. I enjoy the majority of his movies. Critics, I don't think were on board with this one as much as they were with Inception or Memento or the Batman movies. So I'm going to go, this one's tough. I'm going to go, let's say 75.
75%. Still solid, but not
Solid.
one of our all-time highs. Now, James, do you think the actual score is higher or lower than 75?
Well, I'll tell you this: it's no safe house.
Safe House is fun, but what was that score? I remember that was like just an awful score. But it's
yeah, I don't know. I just remember you keep reminding me every time we speak to each other.
Well, because it was lower than my pick. I can't remember what my pick was. It was terrible.
Impact Records.
Jack, I believe you have the all-time low now with Identity Thief. I think it was like 8.
Oh wow, -1.
So Jack has no room to talk anymore. Jack.
I always pick the worst movies, but except for Safe House.
Yeah. We'll be talking about that as old men.
Yes.
And the thing is, it's a pretty good movie, actually.
Yeah.
It was fun. I liked it.
It was good. Man, this is a tough one. I would say 80%. So higher than 75, at least from the critics.
Well, the critics say that it is at 69%.
Oh, I almost got it.
Wow. So
I didn't. I said 75.
You were actually fairly close. 6% off.
Closer than usual.
Is actually pretty close. Yeah, I feel like that's fair, I guess. 69%.
Yeah,
I'm surprised. I thought it'd be higher.
Yeah, me too.
But let's talk about this movie. Let's get into it. Of course, as always, thank you to everyone who is listening or watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Copy the link and put it in your social media profile, and then leave the comment that says everyone needs to check this out right away. It's the best.
Yeah.
There, I did it for you. I wrote it for you. Just do that.
Not a boy.
Okay, let's get into this movie here. It's whew.
Good luck, Jack.
I'm nervous here.
Yeah.
So inside a concert hall, gunmen take control. Another group of gunmen put on fake SWAT team outfits and also try to enter the concert hall. They fill it with sleeping gas and sneak over to a man who's been, quote, made. There is gunfire everywhere, and they go to remove some bombs. Someone catches them, but time reverses, and everyone gets in a van as the bombs explode in a safe location. Our protagonist, who is coincidentally also named Protagonist, does not go to a safe location, though. He winds up in a train yard and is tortured before eating a cyanide pill. James, tell us about this world and the characters that live in it.
Well, look, this is the thing we love about a Nolan film. He has great openers, right? So, I mean, this almost kind of gave me the whole vibe of The Dark Knight.
Dark Knight. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, your Dark Knight Rise, but definitely Dark Knight, because it's like kind of like this big heist scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they're doing it inside of an opera. They get straight to it. I thought it was great. It was great action. We're seeing Denzel's son right away. You know, John David Washington, we know he's the main guy, so we're following from his point of view. Great action, great music, energy, and then I guess he gets shot in the arm, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things start to get confusing. I mean, maybe Andy can go through all that stuff, but the thing with me is when we get to the train track, I'm still trying to figure out, how is he not crying his eyes out when he's getting his teeth pulled out? I can't get over his teeth getting pulled out like that and him, good the next scene. I'm sorry. That would take dental work like that takes time to recuperate.
Yeah. And
okay?
I'm going to tell you guys right now, if I am ever in a situation like that where someone brings pliers, like I'm going to pull your teeth out, I'm telling them everything. So just know anything you've told me in confidence. If someone approaches me with pliers, they're getting the information. Just done. They don't even have to, They're not even have to pull a tooth. They just have to show me the pliers. I go, what do you need to know? Let's get into it. I'll make
Yeah.
you a PowerPoint. What do you need?
Pliers can't be good. I mean, it could be teeth, it could be toes, it could be fingers.
Anything.
Doesn't lead to anything. Nothing good comes from pliers.
They could just use it to grab my hair and pull my hair out, like, which they
All
wouldn't
one
need
single
pliers
strand.
for. But like, I'd still be like, I'm done.
Grab your nose.
whatever you need. Andy, what I thought was great here is that the terrorists waited until after everyone had sound checked before they came into the room.
That was nice of them. Yeah. So at least they got a nice sound check in. And like James said, the beginning of this movie, I was actually like, how is this movie confusing? Like the first 2 minutes, I'm like, I get it. They're going into this opera house. Like James said, amazing action. And then they release this gas that puts everybody out. I'm like, oh yeah, I've totally followed this movie. I'm going to understand it. I don't know what people are talking about. But then I'm only 3 minutes in before I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know anything. I don't know what's happening. Like James said, they're on this, all of a sudden they're by these train tracks and they're just pushing people over and they're just falling it looks like to their death. So I don't know what's going on. I just know that guy that's pulling teeth is not a very nice looking guy. I mean, he's a handsome, okay guy, I'm sure. But, he looks scary. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what world this is. Are we back in time? How did we get to train tracks so fast? So I already knew, I'm in for a lot of trouble in this one. So Wikipedia is coming up right away.
I will say one of the things, again, I think this scene is really cool. And this is something Christopher Nolan does is, of course, he likes to blow things up and do big stuff like that. But even the simpler things, like when the gas hits the room and you see the wave of people's heads falling over as they fall asleep as the gas gets to them, was just really cool visually to see how that played out. And I'll be honest, I was a little confused as to wait, are they planting bombs or are they taking the wave? I didn't really get who was doing what, but I also felt like this is the big shock opening scene. It's okay if I don't get too much of this, which was kind of the case. But I feel like the main takeaway from me at the end of this whole thing was that protagonist, by the way, terrible name. I would have call him Hero or something that's easy to say.
Steve.
Protagonist doesn't roll off the tongue.
Just give him a name. And the dialogue to me, I'm like, this has got to be difficult dialogue. What I wrote it down. He says, "We live in a twilight world," and that was some kind of secret thing.
The code,
I'm like, now I got to pay attention to this. It's just do the people jumping in and gassing people and give me that. Yeah. I could follow that, but code words.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly lost here, but I really started getting lost once things went on. But I will say this. I think the main takeaway from all of this was that protagonist is someone who is basically all in on his missions. He's someone who, even if it means death, he's going to go through with it, which I think is really what the whole setup was up to him taking the cyanide pill was all about, is to show he's someone that once he's on a mission, even if it means he dies, he's going to go through with it, which is important as we learn later on in the movie.
Well, do you think he wanted to die because his teeth were going to get removed? He's like, fuck this. Screw this.
There's nothing left to live for.
How great would it be? He takes it and he can't chew it.
Yeah.
Right. What's worse, right? Like I say, he's lost his teeth. The only thing worse is being Reek from Game of Thrones, right? Just take me. There's no reason to live.
Yeah. So yeah, but you're right. I did feel like they, as silly as it is, you're actually right, James. I really didn't like that he just woke up with his teeth fine and there's not an issue, because you're right. That would be a very long healing process. I would imagine, very long healing process. You can't just shove new chompers in there and expect your teeth to, okay, I guess I'm okay again.
No, you got to wait for stuff to set in. I think they got to drill holes in. I don't know. I haven't done it, but to get caps or whatever you call those things, new veneers, it takes some time. They got to make sure the gums can take it.
And I'm sure if your teeth were ripped out by pliers, it's not like it's an easy fix, But
yeah, they probably didn't hold on to your teeth so you could stick the old ones back in.
Right? Could you imagine the torture's just in case, I'll leave these over here.
Right. The Ziploc bag.
These are for you. Your name's on them. I don't want you to get confused with the other two guys I just ripped your teeth
Dennis,
out.
grab a toy on the way out.
That should have been the plot of the movie.
Wait, these are Jack's
how this man
teeth.
gets his new teeth back.
He gets different people's teeth. His teeth are all weird.
So protagonist wakes up on a boat, and the whole thing was actually a test, and he's needed for a mission. All he knows is the word Tenet. He gets to a base and learns that they're trying to stop World War III. Someone is making bullets in the future, and they are coming back at them in reverse. Protagonist and Robert Pattinson team up to go to Sanjay's to find out more about the backwards bullets. The woman running the operation tells protagonist he made the bullets. Who made the bullets? She says a weapons dealer has learned how to communicate with the future. Protagonist meets with Michael Caine, who says Sater, the dealer, is in a Soviet-era secret town and appeared after an explosion in that town with money and a wife connected to the British establishment. So he needs to get close to her, to get close to Sater, and he'll get close to her through a forged painting. Fellas, this is where I fell off the boat. I have no idea. I had to rewind to this thing so many times. Andy, I feel like I love Michael Caine, but like this whole, I had to rewind that scene like 6 times. Like I was like, what are they talking about?
I have no idea. Michael Caine,
Master Wayne.
Hey,
I can't do it. He's the guy who always like crying. Master Wayne.
And they just made it extra confusing with making Priya is the wife of Sanjay, right?
Yeah.
So you think Sanjay is the guy, but it's actually Priya. I'm like, you got to make that confusing.
Yeah. Every step of the way, they had to make this difficult. Like, honestly, now I like Michael Caine, so keep him in there, but you could have actually just had that doctor that explained the backwards bullets explain everything that Michael Caine explained. You didn't need that extra scene and that extra person. And their dialogue was so fast. They were just like, Soviet era secret town called blah, blah, blah. And there's this painter and blah.
Stalsk 12.
You don't need all this stuff.
And did you guys? Yeah, I was probably the only one that thought this. Did you think Robert Pattinson was imaginary at all? I did.
Why did you think
I don't know.
I wish he was.
When he like showed up, I was like, I don't know if he really exists. Like,
why did you think he was imaginary?
Because no one talks to him, but John David Washington.
He seemed like everything he did was like done really well. Like he was too good. Like with the bungee and all this stuff, I'm like, how does he know all this so well? I'm like, is he not? Or like he was going to be a cyborg or something. I just thought he wasn't real.
This
could still be
that will be answered later for sure.
Yeah. You know, James, protagonist, what I did find throughout this was sort of there to explain things to us in a lot of ways, where, you know, Michael Caine would be like, well, he grew up in a Soviet era secret town, and he would say, yes, I know what that is. It's a town that was used during the Cold War, blah, blah. And he would explain this stuff to, like, he was trying to fill in the gaps. But again, it felt like there's just so much stuff. It's like, just.
Yeah. And I think that's and look, I mean, I think any film person loves Nolan's stuff. He makes event films, right? Mm-hmm. Especially since Batman Begins. The problem with this script is, like I said, it's so confusing that even the characters have to overly explain things for the audience. And I don't think that's necessary. You don't want to make a film like that. I mean, I'm telling Nolan how to make a film, but you know, it's making it too difficult for us. You know, you got to make it easy for us to follow, so we're not having to think about it. We can just kind of follow along and really enjoy the film instead of thinking that, you know, like, you know, that we're idiotas, you know, as they would say in another language.
Yeah, it's very. I was thinking of this. James Cameron or Christopher Nolan isn't a good liar, and what I mean by that is, you know, a good liar. You know, let's say we all go out to a strip club one day and we go back to our significant others. Like, what'd you do? We just say, "Oh, I hung out with the boys," and that's it. And then they say, "Oh, what'd you do?" Just had a few drinks. You just leave it at that. You keep it simple. But bad liars are like, well, I met up with James at 7:30, and then we watched a little bit of Family Feud before Andy came over at about 7:45. And at 7:45, you know, like they fill up too much gap. I feel like that's this movie. There's so much stuff we don't need. You literally, I don't know. They're explaining this picture by the way.
Paintings.
Oh man.
I'm like, what the heck? Like, they're giving me the details on the backstory of the guy who made a forgery who never shows up in the movie.
Yeah, we never
ever.
see this guy. I guess he was a lover or too close of a friend of Sador's wife. I don't know.
Like, why do we? Because this was frustrating me. I was like, so I learned all this stuff. The guy doesn't even come up in the movie. I was so frustrated. But basically, the whole thing could be summed up with, to figure out where the bullets came from, they had to find out where they have to find a way to get close to the weapons dealer that is making them.
I have a question though. I just want to make sure. So the wife, I'm forgetting her name right now.
Sator's wife?
Yeah, Sator's wife.
I called
Kat.
her blonde girl.
It's Kat.
Kat?
Yeah, Kat.
Like K-A-T. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kat, I'm assuming she bought the painting at an auction, but then Sador found out that it was a fake, so he was using that against her. I'm confused about that part.
So I had to rewind this 6 times to figure it out. So what
Okay.
happened was, her job is to like verify paintings and authentic paintings. And so she got this fake one, lied about it and said it was real, and then sold it to Sador for millions of dollars. That's where we're at this point.
Sold it to her husband.
That's how they fell in love.
Right. So because at that point, they don't love each other anymore. And so she was trying to get money from him.
Oh, interesting.
And as we learn later, he figures that out, that it's fake. And so he keeps it so that if she ever leaves him, he will go to the authorities and say, she lied about this painting. Here's the evidence of a lot of the false.
I'm excited to talk about him.
But what's gonna happen is she gonna go to jail, or the guy's gonna say, well, you shouldn't have bought it? I don't know. Sorry, I don't know. Anyway, let's not get too caught up in the painting.
I mean, yeah, you're on this. I'm still trying to figure out Pattinson's real.
I get that, Christopher Nolan wants to make these big movies, and I know maybe you don't want to be too obvious with stuff, but I feel like, why don't they just say, if I leave him, he'll kill my kid? And you get one line and you fill all this out without making it confusing. I
got to make this point before I forget. I don't know why his name isn't anything aside from protagonist. This is ridiculous, like we've already talked about. But do we know why he cares for Kat so much? Is there anything with them? He's very interested in making sure she's okay.
This is one of the main problems of the film. I didn't know if I had to save this for later, but
go for it.
Another reason why this film is also kind of hard to get into outside of the spectacle that Nolan gives us with the buildings blowing up back. I mean, look, it's not a spoiler alert, buildings blow up backwards and forwards, is they're trying to do like a version of Inception. Right. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking, like, why isn't that I'm not connecting with this? Well, first of all, his name's protagonist. And the difference with Cobb in Inception is, it's not about the spectacle. It's also about, we come from the plot, we stay for the characters. He has a lot of personal stakes in the film because he wants to get back to his family. Mm-hmm. And he has a dead wife that's haunting him. And it's really about that. So it makes, you can feel it more. So this movie's missing a lot of that spirit. And we'll go there, but near the end of the film, some very interesting reveals happen, and you're not really feeling what you could feel if we had more info on his backstory, as opposed to him just following through in a mission and going up and out of his way to protect Kat. Well, we don't even know why he's doing it besides the mission. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't connect.
That's a great point. And as we continue on, speaking of her, protagonist blackmails Sador's wife, Kat, with the knowledge that he knows that of her selling Sador a phony drawing, but she says Sador already knows and is using it to blackmail her. Protagonist offers to steal the drawing from Sador if she helps him get close to Sador, but Sador's guys are already there. Protagonist beats the brakes off of all of them, though, and the next day, protagonist meets with Kat, and she explains the drawing is on a boat not being taxed called Freeport. So Neil shows up again to try to get the drawing from Freeport and devise a plan. They drop gold on the tarmac and ram a plane into a wall to trigger an alarm, suck the oxygen out of the building, and then get into a reverse fight with people from the future before we can get any information. The future fighters get away. So again, this is where, Andy, I feel like they got a little too cozy being confusing, this whole Freeport thing and explaining taxes and like this, none of that matter. It doesn't matter that it's tax free on a boat. Just say it's a place where people store stuff. I don't need to see an audit of these guys' tax records.
I tried my best, like during this whole part you were talking about, like on the stuff they were explaining things, I kind of sit there and go, but then right when the action scene starts, I'm in. He's got the cheese grater. He beats him with that. He's beating everybody up in the kitchen. I'm like, fight scene. It's
a great
such
scene.
a cool fight scene. And then like you're talking about the backwards fighting, like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like it's so cool. It's just like, just stick with that. Like all this other mumbo jumbo. I'm like, I'm so not listening, really. I'm like trying to, but I'm like, just give me the fights. Give me the backwards fighting. I love that.
It was very similar to the, also, I guess, like dropping the gold off the plane. It's a small thing. You didn't need to drop gold off the plane, though. Just like the dropping the gold off the plane was inconsequential to the rest of the scene.
And I was confused about that, too, because if gold is dropping off a plane, aren't people running to pick it up? Wouldn't you be like, oh, my God, gold?
Well, when they first said they were doing that, I thought, oh, that's what's going to happen. Is it's going to create a big diversion.
Chaos.
Everyone's gonna be trying to grab the gold, and then they'll do their thing. But it didn't happen.
No one grabbed gold except for one of the guys dropping it. I don't know if you've noticed, he kind of stuck one in his coat.
Yes.
Only smart guy in this movie.
Right.
But James, this is the first real confrontation with the future. Obviously, there's some fun stuff that will play back on this, but as you're watching this, what were your first thoughts seeing this first fight before you knew where it was going?
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool when it's like when they walk into that room after doing, I guess, everything, right? Like going into all the separate rooms and holding their breath. And, at one point, the protagonist's key breaks inside of the keyhole and they have to hurry up. And, he's like breathing hard. He's like, oh, it's yoga, So it's great tension. It's a great scene. And the cool thing, we're just talking about like the action and all that, is seeing kind of like, I guess there's like bullet holes in the glass, but you kind of slowly see like smoke coming from it or coming from, I don't know the right way. So you're seeing it backwards, but it's so confusing, but it's a great scene. And the cool thing is before this scene, we see the protagonist. Dude, that fight scene, that was one of the more visceral fight scenes I've seen in a movie recently, especially out of all his movies. I mean, he was beating those dudes up the way like Batman would. And especially like the first couple of films, you know what I mean? It was very visceral.
That cheese grater thing was so good.
Dude, it was great. I mean, it was angry fighting. So, I mean, it's really just gets you amped up. But it's good because when we see him going against this backwards character, they're equally the dude's just as good with his hands, right? He's good as with his hands as him, and we'll find out why, eventually. But I just thought that was great, but it is very confusing. But all the backwards and the guy like kind of what did they have, like the guy kind of crawling, moving on the ground, but away from him, like backwards. And stuff. Yeah, it's really cool. Like that's the kind of stuff people come for, like that kind of action, even though it's very confusing at the time.
It was very confusing. Visually, it was incredible, though. And I think I do got to give him credit for being able to choreograph that scene, because that must have been very difficult to plan out. But I like how you mentioned the bullet holes, because what I remember thinking when you see bullet holes, especially as the movie goes on, is you go, well, who shot those bullets? Because in this world, a bullet hole means a bullet is coming, not that a bullet has already been shot. And so that's kind of one of the cool things about this movie that I thought is you see the bullet holes, you're like, uh-oh, someone's going to shoot something.
And Priya says something about like, being attacked by the future. So you kind of get like a little nugget of like, oh, okay, I think I know kind of what's going on, but still not really.
Oh, we got a special guest star.
Yeah, we got a special guest. He keeps saying dad, so I had to bring him up.
Hi, Liam. How are you?
Did he watch Tenet?
No, he didn't. He's like, well, Dad, this is this part. So, okay, buddy.
He probably knows better than we do what happened.
Right. All right, dude, back to your mommy, buddy.
Speaking of what happened, back in Mumbai, Priya tells protagonist that someone in the future has given Sater a machine that can turn one thing into a reverse one. And Priya says Sater could be negotiated with if the protagonist can get him some plutonium-241. Kat brings protagonist on Sater's boat with a cover story for who he is, and it doesn't work at all. Sator shows he still has the drawing and says he knows the future. Later on a boat, protagonist explains he wants to partner with Sator to get the 241. Kate tries to kill Sator, though, but protagonist saves him. This gave Sator enough trust in protagonist to explain how he got rich digging for plutonium, and then goes to beat his wife, but she talks him out of it. Protagonist starts sneaking around the boat and sees a helicopter drop off some reverse gold, and Sator kills a guy. When protagonist gets caught, protagonist says he's going to use Cat to get the 241, and Sator gives protagonist some of the reverse gold to pay for it. Ton of stuff here, James. For instance, they go through this big thing to talk about his cover story for who he is and get on the boat. He gets on there, and the first thing the guy does is like, I don't believe you. And you're like, why do we have this whole scene explaining a backstory?
Yeah, and like I said, let's give what's the guy's real name? Kenneth Branagh. I don't know if it's hamming it up, but he really goes there with this.
I really
character.
enjoyed him in this.
It's kind of over the top.
What does he say? He says, I'm gonna chop off his balls and put him in his throat or something like that. I'm like,
I'm gonna watch you choke on your, and it's like, really? All of that?
This guy.
Yeah, and this is at dinner. Right. I think even in Denzel's son even mentioned something about like, okay, it's dinner time. This is not, necessary. Look, I don't know what to tell you, Jack. At this point, I mean, there's so much confusion. This woman pushes him off the boat. First of all, how many chances is Sator gonna give his wife? I mean, she just tried to murder him, okay, off of these fancy futuristic boats. Once again, great scene. And don't tell me it's not weird. You said he was about to beat his wife, but we need to get more specific. He pulled off his belt, very old school. Maybe think of like Ike Turner, or old school 90s Sleeping with the Enemy. For any of you Julia Roberts fans, that bad guy, he's one of the best ever. But it gave you that vibe. It's like, oh, this is a physically abusive dude. Like, let's not get this twisted. This is a physically abusive relationship.
Yeah, that whole part is terrifying too. What does he say? It's like, we want to go sailing or diving or something. And I'm like, sailing sounds fun. And then you see how they sail. You're like, oh God, this is like a terrifying sail experience. And she shoots him, right? Sator. Does she shoot him and then throws him off the boat, or what happens?
No, she just unbuckles him and throws him off.
No, she unbuckles him because these are on those little sailboats.
That's right. Yeah. So just unbuckles him.
So I didn't get this. Why were they going diving? Like, that's weird. It's weird for me to be like, I'm gonna cut your balls off and shove them down your throat. Oh, you have some information? Let's just go for a quick sail.
Right? Yeah. Well, this is rich people stuff. That's what you do. You go diving on these futuristic boats and you have conversations which they're having to yell at each other. It's like, what happened to the old fashioned, let's meet at a coffee shop, somewhere quiet, I don't know, man. This is a chance for Nolan to spend $1 million in a scene.
Well,
yeah, I was watching this thinking to myself, Nolan just wanted to go sailing, huh? And this was how he paid
the coolest sailboats ever. Well, and I wanted to mention one more thing about Sator. They give that music they give him too to show that he's evil. Like almost every scene, he's got that music. It's like, and you're just like, oh, what is this guy gonna do? It's actually that he's gonna turn into like a machine. He reminded me kind of remember that movie
T2?
I was gonna say Wild Wild West with Kevin Kline. Wow. I think is he the bad guy where he like turns into all these like machineries? I was like, is this guy
pre-slap Will Smith?
Yeah, not a good comparison. No one has been compared to Wild Wild West positively. But this is again, now we've got another thing we got to think of: plutonium 241.
Yeah.
Also, when he gave protagonist the gold, like he dropped it and then picked it back up again. I kept thinking that this is going to play in some way. That they did that. Nope, didn't.
It's just to show the reverse nature, but it's confusing. So they make some things be able to reverse, but then they also make themselves. That's kind of the confusing conceit. Because at first you think it's just items that can be reversed. I don't know.
So interesting, but we continue.
Wait, real quick. Just I know we're going to talk about it in a bit, but Does she? How many times does she try to kill her husband in this movie? It happens often, right?
Yeah, a few. Yeah, this.
Anyway, I don't know.
I don't know. So protagonist explains to Sator, explains that Sator buries the time capsule, communicates with the future where it will be, and then the future uses it to send things back. They have to find a way to plan a heist without leaving a trail the future could see, so they could take advantage of getting the plutonium. So Sator attacks Kat while the guys follow the 241. And while the trucks are still moving, they break into the truck and steal the 241. Also on the radio, everyone's speaking backwards, and we get a reverse chase scene. They give up whatever it is they stole. They save Kat, but they get picked up by men in suits anyways and taken away. Sator reverse shoots Kat and then goes off to get the 241 that was left behind. Neil seems to know more than he's let on, and Sator's team moves through time with one team going in from the start and one coming in from the end, so they know all the outcomes. To save Kat, the good guys decide to use it, but it's going to be risky. James, this is where I realized this movie is basically a video game where each level is a different heist.
Basically, I mean, okay. First of all, that scene, once again, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So when the protagonist gets on top of the fire truck, and I guess they're trying to take the whatever you said, cool. Yeah, that's a great scene, and it gave you the vibes of Dark Knight. Obviously, when like the big rig and the Joker's on it, and like these cars trying to kind of trapping one vehicle so they can do a heist on it. I thought that was great, and I think that was our first foray into like, really seeing the rewind when we see that car kind of flip, right? Like backwards flip, yeah. Because even Sator's like pointing to him, like, "Hey, look." When they get to that room or whatever, or those rooms where I guess he reverse shoots his wife, that part was very confusing, right? Because you're like, what happened first? What didn't? I'm assuming John David Washington. It's just too confusing. Like you would have to watch a how-to video. I watched one of those to try and see how this rewind and fast forward stuff goes into. But it was great drama.
So you see like the two Sators, right?
That's when you see the two Sators and him walking backwards. And I don't know if we've gotten to it yet, but it really kicks into high gear when we finally can kind of go through what this whole backwards thing is, when the protagonist now has to go through, because it's all about, once again, saving Kat after she's been shot. He's going out of his way. Just say it. He's in love with you or something. I don't know. I mean, he's so smitten by this lady.
That's what I was wondering the whole time. I'm like, what is it about Kat? Like, I would have just been like, take her.
There was never a moment where they connected either. Like there was never like even something simple like, I grew up loving art and you're into art too. Okay.
Yeah, or
they kissed on the cheek a couple of times, and I guess that's supposed to make us be like, "Oh, okay, they must really be into each other."
She kept mentioning her son, and it's like, it's not like protagonist was like, sometimes that happens in a movie. Jerry Maguire, he like loves the kid, so but that didn't happen either. I'm like,
or he doesn't. He had a son, and he got disconnected from him. Something like that. Once again, give us a backstory. Why does he want it? Why do we care?
Yeah, and
this talking backwards stuff was so cool.
And James, I was like, wow, you're right. This is where I really got lost too. This was such a confusing. I would say this is probably the most confusing scene in the movie with what happens here, to me, anyways. Where I was just trying to, I had to rewind it and be like, what are they talking about? And I think I've got enough of an idea of what happens so I could move on, but I could not really explain to someone in detail, I think, exactly what was going on.
Well, no, hot is cold, cold is hot. You talk backwards. I get it. Makes total sense.
You move forward in time while everyone's backwards, and vice versa, or vice versa.
Hot shower, it's going to be cold. Fire is going to freeze you. I mean, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, it was confusing. In any case, but I will say what I liked about this is what did make sense to me was, they were explaining, like with the heist on the road, is how they had to find a way to steal it without leaving any type of trail that someone in the future would understand. Like, you can't do something that would be in the news, or that would be something where in the future they could say that's where they were, because they didn't fully understand it yet either. I think where, like, if they can see we stole it here, then he can go back in time and tell himself to take care of this or something. I like that was a factor in it, but
and you couldn't run into yourself either, right?
Oh, of course you can't. Even though this isn't a time travel movie, right? It's not time travel, but you can't always run into yourself. That's kind of like the trope with every time travel thing, right? Like,
as established by Time Cop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The splits, right? The splits in the kitchen. We all know.
Is this where he gets the hyperthermia from gasoline, or is that later?
That is just coming up here.
So that's not confusing.
So now, going backwards through time, protagonist follows the stolen 241, but it gets him blown up, freezing him. He gets back to the fellas in the containers on a ship to Oslo. While there, Neil says that the 241 is part of an algorithm that will mess up time and basically kill everybody, I guess. He also tries to explain away paradoxes about time travel by basically just shrugging. Something is going on with protagonist's arm, but there's no time to look at it as they go back into the plane crash and into the wall at the Freeport. They go into the building and, hey, he was fighting himself earlier. They run through everything in reverse and escape in the van. Andy, I didn't understand why they had to go, like, they were talking. I didn't understand. They said to save Cat, they needed to go backwards through time. And I do not understand that at all. That whole Cat being injured and healing her, I didn't get. Did you figure that out?
I think I got it. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I don't know if you get it. Please, somebody, please. No, I think it was the whole thing about going to one of those backwards machines again. Am I wrong? Or I don't know. Like, you had to go put her through a machine, but I'll be honest, I don't even remember if they did that with her.
I don't
know.
That was my thought initially, is that they just needed to go to one of those backwards machines, and that's the last one they knew of its location, so they could go there and use it. But I don't understand how the machine helps her, because they were literally sitting next to one where they were at, and then they just went backward. So I guess I don't understand how that. Now, it played out beautifully, but I don't really understand it. Why it was necessary.
What I didn't understand is he was fighting himself, and one of himself had a helmet on. If I was fighting myself, I'd take my helmet off and be like, dude, it's me. And then we wouldn't have to fight anymore.
But then you can't meet yourself, or you both will like time cop each other.
Yeah, so he had to. Well, that's where he said, I will say this is, Pattinson says what happened. So you can't change it. And so he didn't take his helmet off because he didn't take his helmet off.
Yeah.
Which is why I say he basically, they say, like, what happens if you go back in time and kill your grandpa, therefore making it so you never were born and you couldn't go back in time. He just kind of goes, what happened will happen.
Which is what they explain in this movie, right? That you can't back to future yourself, right? Like, let's go back, and because if that's the case, you go back far enough and make sure Sator like is never born.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Something like that. This madman from 12.
But I did like how we saw the scene where Pattinson takes the helmet off, because I remember that happened earlier. He takes the helmet off and then he just kind of runs away. But he sees who it is, and he's like, "Oh, okay."
Didn't you guys think that? I thought initially that he saw himself. That's what I had thought. But it was funny. It was interesting that he saw the protagonist.
I'm glad they did come back to that. I'm glad they did come back to that, because in that fight scene early on, I'm like, protagonist just let him go. Like, he's like, "What happened to the other guy?" He's like, "I took care of him," and I'm like, "That's it."
Well, I thought he was going to be a bad guy. This is where I thought he was going to be like a double agent, where he was like, "Oh, he's let him go. He's a on my team or whatever." But this is I was going to mention.
And we're going to come back to that too, Jack. I have some clear problems with this and with Cat interaction with the Pattinson character.
So we'll definitely get back to that. But I do want to say, or I want to ask, did you guys feel like there was supposed to be another big bad guy in this? It felt like Sator we were going to, because they kept talking about how he was communicating with the future or whatever. I thought there was going to be some big bad guy in the future that was the real bad guy. Did you guys have that too? Or was that just
there was a lot of Sator too. Like, I feel like he was in like all these scenes and different versions of him. So yeah, I definitely thought there'd be a guy that's like the big boss.
Well, low key, I'm thinking Priya is like that other antagonist in this movie. Like on a certain level. I mean, we'll talk about, things that happen with her character later on, but she's kind of, she's doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. She has her reasons, but she is kind of a bad guy that we come to find out to a certain extent.
You're right, Jack, too, because when they introduced I think his name's Ives, Aaron Taylor Johnson, that guy, when he comes into the film, like, I'm like, oh, is he gonna be like the bad guy, the badder guy?
He's really ambiguous. I actually like he's pretty ambiguous in the film for a viewer, for sure.
Yeah. I want to say before I forget too, I know he's related to Denzel, but his now I just want to say Denzel. What's his name again? What's his real name again?
John David Washington.
John David Washington. Yeah. There are times when he's yelling where I could swear it's Denzel. Like, you hear that voice so much.
Yes,
Like, there are times when I think if I shut my eyes and was just listening, I'd be like, is Denzel into this movie?
Totally.
Yeah, especially when he's speaking, or even sometimes when he's speaking softly. Yeah, he has a similar cadence to his father at times. Not always, but it's definitely there.
How does that sound, James?
Okay, all right, okay. So let me understand this, cat. Okay, all right. That's it. That's just say that the whole movie.
Right. That's all you need to say. Right. You'll still be one of the best if you can do that. So the algorithm was created, but was so dangerous, the scientists broke it into 9 pieces and hid them in the past in nuclear weapons facilities to keep them safe. Sator was able to find and collect them. Priya says the plan was to give Sator the last piece so we could bring them together, and the other 8 so that they could take all 9 of them from him. Protagonist says he and Kat could get the algorithm from Sator, and so, hey, why not give it a try? Also, Tenet was founded in the future, for whatever that's worth. Kate explains that Sator is dying and will dead drop the algorithm, and everyone will die when he dies, echoing a statement from earlier, if I can't have it, no one will. So they go to the place 10 days ago when Sator disappeared, Vietnam, on the boat with Kat. Kat needs to keep Sator alive while the guys get the 241 before the explosion that started this whole mess. Protagonist is on the red team while Neil is on the blue team, and the protagonist is part of the Splinter team as well. The invasion begins, and we get explosions everywhere. Splinter team uses a bomb exploding to sneak into a tunnel while Sator starts to figure things out and talks some crap to protagonist before Kat kills Sator prematurely. The bomb goes off, but Neil is able to get to the fellas just in time. Neil goes back to do his part of the mission, even though it will kill him, and explains that while this is the end for him, it is the beginning for protagonist, and his whole mission is just part of a pincer that protagonist planned long ago in the future. James, it all makes sense now.
Oh, of course, right? It's the similar plot to a USA Up All Night movie from the 90s. Just really easy to grab onto.
Right.
Listen, folks. I feel like Steve Harvey here.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, this scene is the spectacle that we came to see, right? If you think about it from the trailers. I mean, because the fascinating thing is that you have what's cross-cutting, right? You got Kat trying to do something with Sator, right? She's trying to like infiltrate something from him or stop him from doing something, like giving the go-ahead, I think, on blowing something up, or vice versa. And then you have 2 different military teams. One's going backwards and one is going forward. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? I mean, even though it's confusing, it's cool to watch and interesting.
And they did a good job putting the little masks on the people too, so you could kind of like be like, okay, you're in that world.
Of course, exactly.
You're not
and
mad.
then also giving them, I mean, this is kind of too basic, but putting like a red band
Right.
on one team and the blue band on
They're red team,
another.
blue team.
Yeah, exactly. Red pill, blue pill, right? Red pill,
Right.
blue pill. Um, it was confusing. I'll be honest, especially once they get down into there. And I think with Neil, and you will see kind of in the background, you see like that car like honking its horn, trying to get them to not go into there because it's going to blow up. I guess the little entrance is going to blow up behind them and they'll be trapped.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty cool. The only problem is, like I said, when you see this, as cool as it's looking, you're still too confused to understand it. A movie like this would have to take, multiple viewings, and it shouldn't have to be that way for you to understand it. If you want to do multiple viewings, it should be like, oh, that's really cool. I didn't catch that one part, so let's see that again. But for the whole film to feel that way, just very confusing. I don't know if you've gotten to that final part. Yeah, when Neil's explaining, and the whole big thing is that backpack. Right? The backpack is supposed to give us like, oh, you sacrificed yourself. That was you, because he had a mask on, so we don't know who that is.
Yep.
Right. So,
and the trinket, like the red little thingy.
Yeah, with the
hanging from the
trinket and the fact that this is the end for me, but the beginning for you, which is mind blowing if you think about it, right? Like just trying to understand what that means. If it's wish fulfillment, you're like, oh, I'm going to be the hero of this story. And, it's just beginning. I'm actually the one kind of setting things in order. And I think that's what they're letting us know, that our protagonist is really, really kind of like a head general. Like he's running things in the future, which is
John
fascinating.
Connor.
Yeah, he's John Connor, basically. Right.
I literally have that in my
Yeah.
notes. It's got a
Wow.
very John Connor Terminator feel to it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, that instance, but it's still confusing. You have to really think about that.
So, and then I'm a little confused too, because Sater gets attempted to be killed by Kat again on a boat. So that's why before I'm like, because she does shoot him here, right? She shoots him and then pushes him out to sea.
Yeah.
Because I noticed when she shot him, it was like this much blood, like this, like a little penny's worth of blood. I'm like, what did she shoot him with?
A paintball.
Yeah,
A paintball.
But his fall off the boat.
Oh my God, so brutal. But here's the problem with that. She's explaining, you remember early in the film, she explains, and that's kind of cool about the callbacks. She's saying, when I remember coming back to the boat and I saw that this woman jumped off, I guess it was his mistress. And I said, oh, the freedom that she has. I wish I had her freedom. I don't get it, because if that's the case, that means his character would have disappeared after that moment, right? In a certain timeline, right? Because basically they take his body away. So what is this in the timeline of what we're watching when she's trying to push him off boats? You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of confusing.
They do say that's how they knew where to go. That's how they knew where to put her, is because they said that's when he disappeared.
Okay, so that's when he does disappear. But did he disappear when she was explaining that to someone else at another time? You would think he's around, right? Or
yeah, that's the thing, is it feels like they just threw it in there to answer the question that you have now. It doesn't feel like the characters didn't feel like they lived that, if that makes sense. It feels like it was just a one-off thing they threw in for the sake of the movies. Because this was one thing in my notes. I do think they did a great job of explaining everything. They did kind of tie up every loose end. There's not really a lot of, well, what about this? But I almost think they went too far with it, where instead of getting basic things like explaining that he disappeared after this in a real way, to actually tell the story, they went too far out of their way to be like, this is how we go back in time to go back to the plane with the gold on the ground. And like, I don't know. It's just, it felt, like I said, this felt a little bit like someone watched Inception and said, I bet I could top that.
Let me Inception.
Oh my goodness. That's a good premise, right? Let me top that. Like a fan watching Inception and saying, let me top that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess just to put a bow on it and to wrap it up, I think that this movie was actually, it was really like visually, it was incredible. And the idea is there. I think that maybe I feel like Christopher Nolan tried too hard to be Christopher Nolan here. And I think just kind of got in his own way. And this is where I think sometimes you need like a second pair of eyes to go, look, man, you don't need all this stuff. You can make this way easier than you're making it on yourself. I feel like you could have cut an hour out of this movie and not lost anything. Easy.
And we didn't even talk about, like, he kills Priya at the end, like, to cut off all the loose ends, right?
Oh yeah,
And,
that's. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say, I'm like, what? Oh, so she was behind. Like, then it was like more questions for me, because I'm like, oh wait, now Priya, and then Pattinson, I think, said something like, "I'll see you at the beginning," and then he shoots Priya. But then I didn't even realize he shot Priya because she moves like the rear view mirror. So
Oh yeah, they're not gonna show it. Just like with when Sater, like, you know, kind of assaults his wife. They kind of show it, but they don't every time. I think it might just be a little bit too much for the viewer. And I don't want to get too far ahead. Have you guys? Because I remember after seeing this, there were some theories about who Pattinson was, and I don't know if you guys caught that.
Robot.
Yeah,
he's an imagination,
right? He's imagination, right?
I will say,
Dirk
before
Diggler.
you get into to Pattinson, I want to say, because just about Priya, one of the reasons I forgot to even put it in here, and this goes back to the idea of her being the big bad guy or whatever. I didn't feel like she was evil throughout this, so like him killing her at the end didn't feel like you got her. It felt like, oh, okay, I guess you killed her, because she never did anything overtly bad in this.
No, she was a cool character.
I mean, outside of I guess we failed. Like, she had that kind of moment for a little bit, but so him killing her didn't feel like it didn't have that like, yay, you did it. It was just kind of, oh.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, she wanted to end Kat, right? Is that what she wanted to do? She wanted to end her. And once again, Denzel's son, John David Washington, right? I say that with such, jealousy.
Yes.
His son,
right?
No, but he, like I said, he's all in on Kat, and we don't have a legit reason. We don't know anything about him. They didn't give him a name, and that's the problem with this film. Because, like I said, I don't care as much. Just like I said, I mean, he's he's obviously a great soldier, or whatever you want to call it, tactician. He knows how to carry through a mission, but it just doesn't make much sense. But I will say the conceit with there's kind of been a theory, I don't know how legit it is, that Pattinson is the boy. I don't know if you guys have heard that. There's some premises, because we never see the boy's face.
Never.
Yeah.
Similar to Inception, once again, right? But we never see the boy's face. But yeah, there's been some theories that that's the son. But if that is the son, it still throws you off when he's when he's alone with Kat or with them, and it's almost like he's not acknowledging or being overly what do you call it? I can't think of the word, nurturing to his mother. So I don't know how true that is, but that is kind of a big theory out there that he's the boy.
Yeah, I buy that.
My only problem with that is, could he be? Yes, but if he's not, nothing changes. Like, it doesn't. Like, there's not really it's like I could say, like, is it possible that Robert Pattinson's character used to play soccer? I don't know. Maybe he did. I don't know. Like, if he didn't, though, it doesn't matter. Like,
the boy was Michael Caine.
Not to the way the plot was carried out, or even the relationship between him and the guy. It'd be different if you kind of frame that relationship different, then maybe it could hit more. Because they try to hit it a certain way when he sacrificed himself for the protagonist, but you just don't feel it. And that's the problem. You should really feel that moment, as opposed to be like, oh, that's interesting that he did it. It should, it should kind of hurt, or like, wow, he really sacrificed himself for this person.
Right.
You don't feel it.
No.
Right. Because, you're right, James. I think you hit the nail on the head with it. It's visually great. It's very thought through, clearly, even though it's confusing. But yeah, there's just not a lot of, like, I don't really care that he won.
Yeah, no feelings.
I don't really care that Neil died. I don't really care that Kat got away. Well, I go, okay, cool. But if Kat died on the boat with Sater, I wouldn't have felt like, oh man, this movie doesn't hit the same. I would have been like, oh, okay, that character didn't make it. I had the same bond to Kat as I did with the guy who was given the Team Blue and Team Red instructions.
Dang.
Where I was like, okay, this is a character who's doing stuff, and if they make it, they make it. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah.
But Andy, what are your kind of overall thoughts on this one, Andy?
I mean, exactly what we would talk about. It looks cool. Like, if you're watching this movie and you maybe don't speak English and you're just watching it and you're just like visually watching a movie, I think it's great. It's just like, it's so fun to see. But yeah, I was just confused a lot and like had the Wikipedia like 2 minutes in to like follow along. And even then I was like, I'm not quite sure I get all this, but it was fun. It was fun to watch. I definitely do want to check it out again.
I'll say this, and then James will get your final thoughts. It actually reminded me a lot of reading, like reading a contract. If you read it straight through, you have no idea what you're reading. But if you read each line individually and go, okay, I get that by itself, and you read the next line and you go, okay, I get that by itself. But if you just read through a contract real quick, like, wait, what are they talking about? What is this? That's how this movie felt to me. If you watch anything on its own, you go, I get that. But if you just watched without stopping it, I'd be like, I have no idea what this is.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Great. That's a great way to.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it for sure.
But James, any final thoughts before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, a huge Christopher Nolan fan, and there's all kind of different thoughts I have. I wonder how this movie would have been received. It had like a true theatrical run, not during the pandemic. I wonder what people would have thought. Because if not, I think, like, let's just admit, most of us would have went to see this at the theater. Oh, yeah. And how would that experience been then? And that confusion, you know what I mean? Like walking out of it.
Yeah, it would have been kind of cool to talk with people afterwards. Like you all just meet outside the theater. Because amongst like, that's how I watched Game of Thrones with like 3 other people. So we could be like, oh, that's that person. So I think in a group, it would have been kind of interesting. Because then, like James said, somebody would have been like, maybe Pattinson's the son. And then you're like, whoa, okay.
Right. But it goes back to the old conceit when you see like a really good movie and when you watch like the explained video and then it makes it like 10 times better, but you should not have to rely on that. You see what I mean? Like you should not have to have someone on YouTube explain, certain plot points to you and premises. It's just, and I think that's the problem. And Nolan is kind of like prisoner of his own success because each movie he's had is always kind of upping the ante, and obviously Inception's really up there. I mean, a lot of his movies, I think probably one of his best movies, Memento, another film that plays with time, obviously, Memento. But a simple premise. And sometimes the simplest premise is the best for the viewer. You know what I mean? Because we're not coming to think too much with film. I mean, nothing wrong with it. It's good to have thinking films, but you want someone to enjoy the experience and not be overly confused with what they're watching. So I think that was the issue. But John David Washington was great in it for what he did. So I always wonder these what ifs, because like I said, this is a movie that was released like right pandemic, almost like not height of it, but like near the end of 2020. People weren't going to the theaters.
Right.
They just weren't.
Yeah, it did terrible at the box office, if I remember. I mean, obviously, it's not its fault. I think, like you said, James, if this came out in 2019, I think it would have been a huge movie. But obviously, it was like a weird time. And then I think because it was confusing, and then fair or not, people saw the box office numbers and were a little put off by it. And then for me, I see like the 3-hour runtime, and I'm like, oh, okay. So that always turns me off. But let's one thing also I thought was fun, just because I'm a nerd, is Christopher Nolan, Batman, directing Robert Pattinson, Batman. Speaking of connecting movies through who was in what, where, and why, Andy, can you hit us with a 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon?
And you were getting there yourself, my friend. Robert Pattinson was in The Batman with Zoe Kravitz, who is in X-Men First Class with Kevin Bacon.
Oh. Nice.
Thanks.
Nice.
Slam dunk. I should have just finished.
Yeah, I mean, you gave me the assist.
Yeah, easy peasy. Well, that does it for us. We're going to 2021 to discuss Pig next. And then we're going to go to 2022 to discuss Knives Out, Glass Onion. So that'll be a fun one. I'm Jack Farmer. You can find me at Real Jack Farmer across all social media. Andy, where can the world find you?
You can find me at Just Andy Rossi.
And Denzel's nephew, James Shippy. For those who want to follow your work, where can they catch up with you?
Yeah, you can find me on IG at JeShippy2 and on Twitter at JShippy2. And KXL News Portland.
KXL News? What?
Can you give us a sign off?
Gosh. This is James Shippy, FM News 101.